not just we're like, oh, soft money makes you have a soft mind. I think there's like a causal connection. I don't have it
Mhm.
precisely articulated yet, but it's even when
I
I
think it's
was looking at
linguistics.
the Salem witch trials the other day. I may have mentioned this last time, but they were counterfeiting money like crazy right up until they started burning people.
Of
They started
course,
burning all their women alive,
of
but it was
course,
like
yeah.
right at the end of this long counterfeiting spree. So I think we pollute the money and there's a feedback loop into our mind and it really fucks us up.
We're living it right now. I mean, we're
Yeah.
living in it. The White House is out here today. I don't know if you saw their tweet, but they're backing a wealth tax on the 400 richest families in America. The fucking White House. So it's like it's probably going to happen at some point that they're going to tax unrealized capital gains, which will be for us for selling of Bitcoin. So like, it's not going to let up anytime soon. People are deranged. Everyone you talk to is fucking deranged, and you're living in an insane society being run by insane people for insane objectives, and you're liable to be put away as fucking insane for expressing that.
Right.
Eric Kaysen is more sane than anybody I interact with on a daily basis, but he sounds
Oh,
crazy.
Jesus.
We're
all in trouble. But no, like we all live in Plato's cave. It's like this is all just like the same shit throughout history on repeat, and like we're just in that cycle again. And like soft money, soft minds. This all comes about through. There's a really important historic arc that happened both linguistically and historically with states coming into conflict, because it was only after the absolute horrors and terrors that World War II manifest and this whole system breaking down that could such rigid authoritarianism come through, and could the justification of seizing wealth and redistributing it in such a radical fashion take place, which is like the bedrock and the foundation of kind of our society, which is all based upon this very slippery linguistic process that has allowed for a parsing that's so deep that like a great example is the World Economics Forum thing about like you'll have no privacy, you'll own nothing, you'll be happy. They like mean that. They like sincerely believe that. And like if you were to have a more in-depth conversation with them, being like, do you think that like having no privacy would be alarming? They'd probably be like, like I haven't actually thought about it, and they're like dead fucking serious.
Yeah.
And it's really scary because like that's part of what this society has produced, is that because the incentives are so misaligned, there doesn't have to be this responsibility that follows through upon what is said, and so like we exist in this gaslighting society where Biden meant he would close down Gitmo, but like turns out it's kind of hard to fight the deep state. So fuck it, we won't do it.
Yeah.
I mean, by the way, I tried to restart the stream because it says you can't do it on the fly. And as a result, like now the YouTube stream is on a different one than the original, but it didn't work for Twitter. So we're only on YouTube. Fuck it. But this is always how it's been, right? We're just at like a climax of it now, or hopefully a fucking climax. Like I remember thinking in high school that, and I suspect we were all a little bit different, growing up, but like, I remember thinking I'd rather be tormented by the truth than coddled by ignorance. And I felt that everyone was like kind of crazy, and you go along to get along, and you're not super sure yourself at that age anyways. And so you're just reading and learning and experiencing and all that jazz. But like, it's been like this for a long time, so it's not like any of the things that are happening now are unexpected. They're still a bit difficult to integrate because like they're so extreme. And here we are watching it all unfold. Like we've got eyes everywhere through social media and stuff, right? Like never before. But and people predicted this for years, right? You go back to the guys in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s and Ayn Rand and all these people. Like it was very logical progression, easy to predict, but nobody listened, and here we are.
Yeah. There's this French philosopher, Alexis de Tocqueville, who went around America in the like late 1800s, I think like the 1870s or something. And he basically said that, paternalism will be the death of America. And if you look at the way we treat the government now, most people do treat the government like their father, and, they want to be babied. They don't have any personal responsibility. And that was never the intention of America. You don't come to America to be lazy and rest on your laurels. You come to America to fucking work and risk and, pursue happiness or property. I don't know why the fuck Jefferson wrote happiness. Should have written property.
Yeah, he really
did write
up.
property. That just came out of the second draft. The first draft was better too, because
I've never read the first draft.
And yeah, he has a first draft that he wrote by himself that wasn't reviewed by Adams or the others. And in that he explicitly actually wrote property as opposed to happiness. In addition to, he had a whole sentence about the horror that was slavery and it had to be abolished. And they were like, take that out. The South kind of needs that. And it's interesting because like it was a question at the time that they were willing to compromise on. That was this fucking ghost that came back, 120 years later to,
that is super interesting. But you also like, I think about those guys quite a bit, and I'm just like, man, of course, imperfect. And as you just said, like, some mistakes there. But can you imagine a group of people getting together today and imbuing a founding document with that degree of wisdom that they did? There's no fucking chance, right? Like we just wouldn't be able to get our shit together enough to both have people that can do that and then agree to it like collectively. I mean, it was pretty remarkable, really.
I think one thing that I was thinking,
like a 6-week time vortex that separates us from the actual physical fist of the state going down our throat,
Right.
I also always think about, it's like, oh man, you look back on those guys, they were such Renaissance men, but it's like, yeah, 98% of the population couldn't read, these guys were the only guys who could read. So of course they knew everything,
But their level of reading,
the disparity was greater then because they were smart, right? They could speak several languages. They read philosophy and science and math and
But the people around them were just like,
But when you read their level of writing, I mean, they are on another fucking level. When you read, I don't know how to describe. I've been reading John Stuart Mill. I know he's not quite in that category, but he's close. And just the way they can go deep on an idea versus you read something someone posts on Medium today. We have this like 1-sentence paragraph thing. I guess we've just diminished ourselves a lot. I mean, there's still good stuff out there. I'm not saying this is like black or white, but the guys, the founding father type Renaissance men, they could really wield the pen like a sword. That's truly fucking impressive.
Yeah. All right, gents. Well, we're tight on time. So shall we break into the reason why we're getting back together here and got cut short the other day?
Let's do it.
Anybody want to go first? Rob, I guess I'll give you first stab, but you can hand it off if you wish.
Oh, I was just going to say, come at me, bros. So, I mean, I was embroiled in my first public controversy through this BitClout situation, and I've thought a lot about it. I tried to write about it initially, and I think a lot of what I wrote stands, but going in order of what happened, I think the first thing I'd like to say is I take responsibility, and I told you this, John, on the phone, that my initial intention had an impurity in it, which was, hey, let's tweet about this thing and see what it does to the market cap. So for me, not seeing that initially was, I think, where I tripped up. And then I put it out into the Twitter sphere, and immediately it went WWF, right? People like, you can't tweet about this, you can't talk about this. And there was an element of misunderstanding on my part because I tweeted out the link to this thing and I didn't even know like how it worked yet. Like, oh, you got to tweet out a link to activate the thing and do the whole thing, blah, blah, blah. So I think it was perceived as though I was tweeting it out to activate it to do something, and people went ape shit on me. And then I just dug in. I mentioned this as well. I didn't know at the time, but I'm 1% trait agreeableness on the Big 5 personality test, which, as we discussed, is common among a lot of Bitcoiners. But my general feeling at the time was a lot of people telling me what not to do. And maybe due to that personal blemish or psychological aspect of myself, it inspired me to just do the opposite and go against the grain. And then things just got out of control. They just snowballed. But I guess the end, like the outcome, there's a lot we could go through in between. I'm sure we will. But at the end of the day, I was airdropped this thing. I sold it. I never told anyone to buy it. So this is where, I mean, you can, don't trust me, verify. You can go read everything I ever wrote about it. I didn't delete any tweet. And then I gave away the fucking money. It was like 90 million sats. Wasn't even a lot of money. I just gave it to Brink. So
Nice.
I feel like I've done as much as I can at this point. And these people that are still circling on Twitter, talking about it endlessly, it's like, what? Like, go fucking do something useful. Like, I understand it's a drama and it's a controversy and all that, but like, I don't know. I get tired of seeing it and reading about it. I can only imagine how everyone else feels.
I mean, it's all directed at you, so I don't really care. I mean, like I don't know. Like if you like, I love you, Robert. I appreciate what it is. When you tweeted about BitCloud, I'm like, oh shit, here we go. You know, like it was clear to me that like something was going on. Not to mention that, you know, whatever the market cap is and how much it was worth. Like, I don't know, but if somebody's going in and buying something because you tweeted about it, like, I feel like you're pretty deaf to a lot of what we're saying. So, yeah. And furthermore, like that people want me to like convene the Council of Public Safety for Bitcoin. Like, I'm fucking uninterested. Like, I think you've taken a lot more responsibility than most other people that do this kind of shit. I mean, who was it? Tracy Mayer just like disappeared. Like, who fucking knows what happened to him? Might be different if he came back and was like, hey, sorry about, you know, whatever happened. So yeah, I just think it's been weird watching the Public Committee Safety Council come out and be like, cancel Rob, like burn Greed Love, like get his head on a pike. And it's like, okay, like now there's one less ally in the fight against Bitcoin. Like that's unfortunate.
Put my head, it's like the Twitter, I don't know. I've been through a lot rougher things in life. Now I would be remiss to say going into this, I knew I was walking into the hornet's nest. So I was trying to like put on my maximum stoic mindset and separate myself from my ego. But after a prolonged assault, it did kind of burn through my ego and get to me a little bit towards the end. Mm-hmm. So I don't recommend it. It doesn't feel good.
I think the miscalculation I think you made is essentially like this is, I mean, you don't believe in BitCloud, do you? You don't like the project or anything, right?
I fucking sold it.
Yeah, no, I know. And I think the miscalculation was essentially, okay, everybody on this stream knows that there's certain things you can't say on Bitcoin Twitter. You know that. The plebs will come after you. They will put you
I didn't know that, actually.
Oh, you didn't? Well, okay.
No, I didn't know there's things that I can't say. And I actually don't believe in things that I can't say.
Here's the thing. Bitcoin is a left curve, right curve phenomenon. And there aren't that many people on the right side of the curve. There are a fucking lot of people on the left side of the curve. So Bitcoin has become more dogmatic and puritanical over time. And so a lot of the new entrants to the market are like, hey, we're being toxic. Fuck, I love being an asshole to people. Like, let's do it. And then you ask them, you go, hey, do you have any insights about Bitcoin? Not really. I owned Dogecoin 6 months ago. You know, like that's a lot of the new class of Bitcoin, like new people that were coming in, like, you know, beating up on you and shit. But I think basically, like, or the way I perceived it, and maybe this was subconscious on your part, was essentially, you know, it's like walking it. To me, it looked like you were trying to walk a tightrope, and you were trying to do this in a way that was palatable. And I think what would have been better to do, you know, would have been to say, hey, man, this thing's a piece of shit. I'm going to flip it for Bitcoin. And if that had been the thing right up front, I don't think the controversy would have ever happened. I think people would have just been like, yeah, sure. Yeah.
Bitcoin, well, that's the deal, because so when my first tweet, there was two intentions. One was and that's the impure intention, is like, okay, what's it going to do to market cap? And now I see that in retrospect, it's like, well, you're only evaluating that so it will do one thing on market cap to see if it will go up. So that's a pump, right? That would be an impure intention. The second intention was to actually fucking ask about it, because I didn't know anything about it at the time. I didn't even know that, because someone had mentioned to me that, oh, it's a thing that could be agnostic and be on top of Bitcoin and blah, 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 whatever. I'm like, okay, I don't fucking know. I haven't looked at a shit coin in 18 months. So let's go look into this thing. And so I was actually asking for just resources. And that clearly blew up in my face. You know, I didn't intend for it to become some type of viral phenomenon by saying, hey, what do you think about this thing?
Yeah, I think, you know, I asked myself about this situation because you fucked up. Like, you fucked up, bro, for sure. And I asked myself, I go, but Rob has also done a lot of good in the Bitcoin community. And, you know, how can he come back from this is what I'm essentially saying. Like, there are people who were on the wrong sides of the block size war and then never really apologized for it or took ownership of it. Those people can never come back. Like sometimes this question comes up of like, can Roger Ver come back? And I think the answer is like, fuck no. But like, you know, I don't view your sin as egregious as Roger's sin, because Roger attacked Bitcoin. You know, it's much, much more egregious. So of course he's been excommunicated. I don't know. I just,
that's like an
I've been
excommunicated
and that's what
It's not even close. It's not even close. But
when I
close.
read and I put that in the piece, you know, Tomer Strolight had defined toxic maximalism, and I was like, I agree with what he's saying. It's like to preserve the core protocol rules of Bitcoin, to protect this emergent money. Like, yeah, you need to protect it ideologically, but clearly, clear as fucking day, I never attacked Bitcoin in any way, shape, form, or fashion. So my general feeling is that there's a little bit of confusion in the beginning. I fucked up with impure intention and or misunderstanding of the question and or my audience. It came back at me, and then my disagreeableness was activated, and it just snowballed.
yeah, my impression on all this, and this might take me a second to get out, so give me some space. But first of all, like part of me obviously doesn't even want to have this conversation, right? Like I know how much you've contributed to the space. I know how much I admire your work and admire you as a person. And a part of me wants to be like, who cares? Water under the bridge, it's not a big deal. Let's all just keep going, right? But another aspect of me wants to say like, no, there's actually a good lesson here, and I think it's worth exploring. And also to preface what I'm about to say, like, I don't mess with shitcoins, right? And I don't do it primarily because being Bitcoin only, not only do I think it's the most correct economic bet, let's say, but it gives me such a degree of mental clarity and zen that I'm then able to apply to all this other stuff that we always like to talk about, right? The philosophy, the psychology, the sociological component of all this, like the whole phenomenon, right? It frees up mental space because, like, you know, I remember back in like 16, before I knew any of this garbage, and you open up a Binance account, you're like, well, why don't I fuck around with this and fuck around with this and try to get some more Bitcoin? And like your brain is taken up by like the chart going this way or the chart going that way, and I'm this rich now, or I'm that rich now. And like I look back on that with disgust. I'm like, oh God, that was like, what is that? Like now I have none of that. Is completely out of my life. And I have such a high degree of confidence that my Bitcoin is going to be there when I need it, and it's going to continue to grow, that like I feel a great freedom not to have to worry about anything else, right? The other thing is I don't think I can play that market successfully. Like everyone, of course, it looks easy, but most people get burned. And then like the other issue, and Rob, we were talking about this once. I'm not sure if you were on that conversation or if you just seeded it, but like in your piece, Masters and Slaves of Money, right? You talk about these companies that came from Europe and went to Africa and were able to counterfeit the local currency, right? And I sometimes think like if you were like a deck boy on that ship, right? You weren't part of the machine. It was your summer fucking job or whatever, right? And the boys were like, yo, man, like we figured out how to counterfeit their currency. Like, and here's like $1 billion in local currency or 1,000 or whatever it is. Like, what is the morality of that deckhand being like, oh, and going into that economy and spending it, knowing that it's bullshit, but having it have market value for a time because of the deception? Like, what is the morality around that decision? I think that's like somewhat of an interesting thing to delve into. Not that it's a perfect corollary to shitcoins. But also like this whole tainted by any involvement with shitcoins. Like, for example, Hodl, you and perhaps the other guys, and a lot of people these days, you took out a HELOC like earlier in the year, right? When shit was pumping and you were all excited, right? And so what's worse? Getting money from the spigot that is a direct result of the state's monopoly on violence, such that they can intervene in financial markets, and their manipulation of the currency permits this distortion of the cost of capital that you uniquely have access to because you're an asset owner, which directly disenfranchises cash holders, non-asset holders, that, or entering into a voluntary market where there is no coercion whatsoever, and people are saying, I would like to buy this shit coin, I will sell it to you, or and I will give you this much for it. And another person says, I would like to sell this shit coin and I will sell it to you for this much. Which one is worse? I mean, I think we would have to agree that there's at least more coercion involved in the former, right? And so, and we can, do you want to hit that now, or shall I keep going?
For me personally, we're born into the fiat system. We all use fiat, right, on a daily basis. And that's just how it is. Bitcoin hasn't won yet. It's not that close to winning. And so I don't have a disgust response when I interact with fiat debt or fiat in general. But when I interact or, when I see people shitcoining or see people in the NFT market, I have a visceral disgust response to it. I mean, like,
fair. Me too.
That's what happened. I think that's what happened with Rob. I think Bitcoin Twitter in general had a disgust reaction to Rob because yes, there were the plebs who were going like way too hard on the memes and really just being outrageous dickheads for sure. And there's always that. But, I had a lot of conversations with people who we all respect who had the same emotion of disgust, essentially. And I think it's just in 2017, people wouldn't have reacted that way to you. In fact, we all dealt with an airdrop coin and we all profited off of it. Or at least if you were on the right side of the ideological warfare that was happening, I viewed it as but I think the difference then was I viewed it as my duty to dump Bcash. And, we had a war on our hands and like I had to get rid of this thing as fast as possible. But at the same time, I'm not pure. I traded Ethereum during 2016 and 2017. And then I flipped the profits for Bitcoin because it was just like, it was too obvious what was happening.
With Bcash, there was this really interesting market incentivization that like created the civil war because also like now we have this shitcoin airdrop. And the question is like, how much does shitcoin go up or down? And like, it's all free alpha, right? So like, what do I do? And like, this is my own like story arc of shitcoining. It's like, I traded through that pretty well and it was like a great thing. But this was also like part of where I was coming to the end of my shitcoin arc because, part of the civil war happening had you start thinking about what's really actually going on. And like here's my word on toxicity is that like, look, as a Bitcoiner, like I know that I don't know a whole lot. Like I'm like pretty dumb, but like I'm aware that like I'm pretty dumb. And I'm aware enough to know that all of these other people are just as fucking clueless and dumb as I am at the very least. So they clearly don't know what the fuck they're talking about at all. And so when they come along and go, yeah, like pro Bitcoin, like I'm crypto and I like this too. I'm like, do you really know what the fuck you're talking about when you say something's decentralized and that like it uses crypto and like what's your blockchain and like what's all this semantic shit about? And usually there's a pretty dumbass answer behind it, which kind of unveils like, oh, we're in the cave and you think the shadow is okay. Fuck.
Yeah,
right.
There is this thing like we all. Most of us, the vast majority of Bitcoin maximalists did interact with shitcoins, trade shitcoins at one point, right? And then, I think it was an emergent phenomenon where we all sort of realized what was what all at once. And it was around the block size war, obviously, like Eric said. And then we became more pure after the fact. But I do have to wonder, like, is that the greatest sin in Bitcoin is after you've had your like rabbit hole moment, you go back to shitcoining for some reason? Is that the greatest sin? Because I think for me, as somebody who lived through the block size war, the greatest sin is attacking Bitcoin. Like, for instance, Trace Mayer, when I had that interaction with him, was, it was a private conversation for about an hour outside of the bar. And he was basically telling me that he was going to attack Bitcoin using Mimble coin and that he wanted all of the maximalists to flow to Mimble coin. And to me, I viewed that as a direct attack on Bitcoin, which is why I went to Twitter with it the next morning. But, if he had told me, hey, man, I'm going to flip this for more Bitcoin, I wouldn't have said shit, if I'm being honest, because I don't care about that. Doesn't mean anything to me.
I think so. My point was just to say we have to be careful about like the moral logic that we're applying to these things, right? Like the shit coins or loans that are only made possible by coercive governments. Like, let's at least apply logic, a consistent logic to them. Not defending either of them, obviously. And if I had if I had $1 million home and I could borrow 200 grand against it right now, I obviously would. I mean, so, how different is that from shitcoin? I think it's an interesting question, like going back to shitcoining after kind of getting the becoming a Bitcoin maximalist. And like I just explained, to me, there's always an appeal, right? You see something go up 100x and you're like, I would like 100 times more money, but
It's tempting.
that's the trade-off. Like, and I think that's why we continue to go deep into Bitcoin to try to understand what it really is. And we're still all figuring out the proper approach to this. I think many of us are coalescing around the answers, like stick to the focus on this. Let the Zen like flow through you and let it be your foundational rock upon which to build your life. But the noise can be distracting sometimes.
And it's certainly overly puritanical in a lot of instances these days, because, for instance, like on Rob's post, the initial post, I wrote, LOL, have you even read their white paper? Question mark, whatever. And then somebody was like, you read their white paper? What's wrong with you? I was like, I read it to make fun of it. What the fuck are you talking about?
But here's the point I was leading to is when I saw your tweet, Rob, like for me, the tainted with shitcoin was not the issue. Like given your profile and the way you framed it, because you said something like, first project since Bitcoin that seems interesting or whatever. Now that turns out to be somewhat disingenuous, right? Because you admitted later.
Well, I think I said just the first one I've looked at since Bitcoin. I don't know if I said it looked interesting. I'd have to go back and look myself.
I thought that comment was there, but I'm sure someone will pull it up and show us. But yeah, so it wasn't so much the tainted with Bitcoin. And Eric, to your point, like I agree in radical responsibility, right? Like if anyone is making a financial decision because Rob Breedlove, AmericanHodl, Eric Case, and John Vallis made a tweet about something, you're a fucking idiot, and life needs to teach you some harsh lessons, right? But my thing was this, and the reason why, Rob, when we had that call a couple of weeks afterwards, I say the same thing now as I said then. That what I took from it and why I thought the response was partially justified was not because necessarily the shitcoining, but because I thought people could see that you were being disingenuous or somewhat dishonest. Like it seems when I saw the tweet, it seemed obvious to me. I was like, oh, Rob's been told there's 50 grand or 30 grand or whatever it is waiting for him. He wants it. And Hodl, like you said, he's like trying to position it as not just a grab, but like a more, like a more morally acceptable way to just do a money grab, basically. Like I'm going to say, what does the free market think of this? And this is interesting. And then I'm going to grab it anyways. Like, I think everyone would have at least been able to appreciate, like, okay, if someone told me that the free market is bubbling up 50 grand for me to take, everyone's at least going to consider that, and if you just come out and say, look, because of my profile, they're offering me 50 grand. I feel like taking it. It's a free market. Fuck you. And I think you would have ultimately gotten less heat. And the reason why I think that is because, and my impression about all this and what we're all doing around here, like, why is there such a strong ethic and principle of honesty, like around all this? Well, obviously we're dancing around this thing that may be the greatest instantiation of truth we've ever beheld. So naturally that's going to imbue into us, or we're going to be converted to that quality of radical openness and truth. And that's represented in the human action realm of honesty, right? And I think it's very clear that this space places an extreme value and emphasis on honesty to the point of toxicity sometimes. So even when I see like someone saying just something like abjectly mean or unnecessary on Twitter, I'm more inclined to be like, yeah, because, I'll explain that one. Because in my opinion, you can say anything you want to me and I'm not going to care, because I'm the arbiter of the validity and veracity of my own action, right? So like, I know, of course, we're not perfect and I'm going to fuck up a bunch, but like, at least I'm making decisions of my action. I'll take feedback, but I ultimately don't care about like over the top criticism. But I kind of do value that someone had the gusto, even if it's wrapped up in all their imperfections and insecurities and emotions, to actually just say what fart thought came out of their head, and put it out there, because it's truthful. Even if it's speaking to like an imperfection, it's truthful. And so I think the big offense was the dishonesty, the disingenuousness. And you got to appreciate that it's also contrasted by what people have come to expect from you, which is like, Well, first of all, like your insights about money and philosophy and stuff on Twitter are like amazing, right? They're always very carefully considered. You're very careful with your words, and you're helping us all expand our understanding of this stuff.
Thank you.
You also clearly have a commitment to like refining yourself as an individual, right? You're trying, from my perspective, it seems like you're trying to become, you know, to use a cliche term, the best person you can. You're trying to live the most meaningful, you know, moral, you're trying to extract your ultimate potential. Let's
I
say.
want to be a
Something-
fucking Renaissance man.
It
Yeah.
was something like that, right? And I think that that's clear, right? And so as a result of that, I think a lot of people admire you. And then when that tweet came out, it was like such a schism in the normal stream of what people expect from you. They're like, oh, this is clearly a departure from how Rob typically communicates. It's clearly less honest than how he communicates. And then your unwillingness to recognize that, even because I know you got a chorus of people that came at you, and sometimes it's hard to discern like who's just a troll for troll's sake and who's a member of the troll chorus, but who's actually otherwise has some opinions or is a type of person that I might respect or what have you. You kind of just took a blanket approach to denying the validity of the criticism entirely, and perhaps also not parsing out what was particularly being criticized. And so I'm coming to a conclusion on this thought, but I'm sure afterwards you got a bunch of people hitting you up being like, Rob, who, you know, don't worry about that stuff. You're doing great. Keep doing your thing. Like, you know, haters gonna hate, that kind of thing. And the reason why that wasn't me is because as someone who's in this with you, and we're all a part of this thing, I don't know what to call it, but like, I want to speak to the best potential in you, as corny as that sounds, right? Like, I want to treat you as though I expect you to be the best version of yourself possible. And to me, that meant not being like, don't worry about it, Rob, bunch of haters, like, keep doing it. To me, that meant like, dude, I think, and I don't think you did it intentionally, obviously throughout our conversations, that seems clear, but like, I just think it was a blind spot where dishonesty crept in and you didn't see it. And you had all of this feedback that came back at you. And because you didn't see it, and because of your disagreeableness and all these other things, you went with, you know, shield up and get combative as a result to meet it. Whereas I think ultimately you cannot care what any of those people think, but I think they did you a service, because if they had just been like, poo Rob, but we'll let you go with this one, there's no learning that happens, right? This whole thing doesn't happen. But because of the extremeness of the response, well, this conversation happens. And I think it actually gives you the right type of feedback, which is, if you're genuinely looking to refine yourself and, you know, again, be the best person that you can be, then you should be desiring feedback from people that are pointing to those elements of yourself that are your blind spots that you can't see, but that you would want to rectify. And knowing you, I know that you probably have an explicit stated goal of doing your best to speak and act out the greatest truth you possibly can. And as we often quote Peterson and stuff like that, like, a part of that is speaking honestly. So from my perspective, and who knows the motivations from all the people that responded, because once this gets rolling, then it's just a fight, right? Then people choose sides, people dig in, all the emotions come out, right? So then it becomes a lot more messy. But I would think a lot of those people that chimed up was not so much that like, you're a bad person because you touched a shitcoin, and not even you're a bad person because you quasi promoted a shitcoin, but you're a bad person because you thought you could be dishonest with us. And we were, you know, we're in this together. We're honest with each other, because what we're doing is we're increasing the density of the core of this thing around certain principles, right? And Bitcoin is that. And then around that, you have things like principles and honesty and truth and trust and things like that. And I think people got somewhat offended or put off by that. And that was the genesis of at least part of their reaction. Paul, you're smiling and shit. What's going on?
While you were speaking, I just realized that I genuinely respect Dieter Bock. I genuinely respect it because he always tells his version of the truth.
There you go, right?
I mean, God, I can't believe I admitted that on camera.
I do not, for the record. I've never seen that guy type an intelligent sentence in my life. So I appreciate, John, first of all, you pointing out the moral ambiguity, because I think there's this big tendency to look at things in black or white terms, and people will tweet that. They'll be like, you violated all ethics and morality and you're evil because you typed this word. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Burn him.
And this, yeah, whatever. We all interact with shit coins every day. Like, we use US dollars and we're trapped to some extent within that system. So there is some ambiguity there. And I just appreciate you pointing that out. I throughout this, it started again with this. I really sent the initial tweet just like not even fucking thinking about it. There was no long grand strategy. There was no like, oh, I'm going to go out and morally justify this maneuver to get some more money. Like,
that's probably why the blind spot seeped in, because it was off the cuff.
There's no premeditation at all. I literally was just like sitting in my hotel room. I was like, oh yeah, this thing that I heard about a few months ago, it's like a free airdrop thing. I'm going to look at it. Let me see if I can get some resources on it and see what it does to the market cap. Send. And then it just exploded.
Right, but with the impression that like there's some free money for Big Daddy here, right?
Oh, of course. Well, that was the first, and that's the first sentence in the thing I wrote about it. It's like the prospect of free money is what made me look at this thing in the first place. There's no qualms about that at all.
This reminds me of, I'm sorry, I'll tell you.
You can roast me in a minute, Eric. So this happens. The disagreeableness kicks in, and then I'm like, okay, now I'm going to be in this mode where I am being attacked. I'm being told, don't think about this, don't talk about this, don't write about this. I'm also, and I mentioned this too, that I had never considered myself as a brand. Never once in my life had I self-talked to be like, oh, what does my brand need to look like when I say this? Like, I just have been tweeting things up until this point as a person. I never considered myself a brand, but in conversations after this, I realized that was also a mistake. Talking to guys that have big followings, or like, you have to actually mind what you say to some extent and consider the repercussions on your audience.
I don't know about that. But keep going.
We were talking about you in Miami. I mean, and we were saying, Rob is basically like on a rocket ship ride to the moon. I mean, you were like the top influencer of 2020, and it is interesting that you were largely oblivious to it.
Yeah, I've just never been here before, right? Never been to this rodeo. So I think there's definitely blind spots there, which I willingly accept and admit. And then I think some of this is attributable to just the low resolution or low bandwidth communication of Twitter in a way. Because it's like you say one thing and then people just immediately take it to one extreme, and they come back at you with this extreme. And then if you're disagreeable, you dig in and you're like, fuck you. And then it just completely blows up. And John, like you said, there are these principles propagating through us from Bitcoin, right? One of which is honesty, like to be very honest. So I think at the core of this, the original, and that's why I always go back to the intention, because I've been reading this book, The Seed of the Soul. It always talks about everything originates from intention. So I'm like, I think I had an impure intention in the beginning, which you could define that as a self-deception in a way. Like, I'm telling myself, oh, I'm going to just ask about this thing. But the truth is, I wanted this money, or I wanted to look at this project because there's a prospect of free money attached to it. So that impurity perhaps gets brought to the surface through this process. And like you said, Hodl, I was on a pedestal of some kind that I didn't intend to be on. I never like raised my hand and like, hey guys, put me on some fucking moral pedestal. I'm not a moralist. I'm not a saint. I'm just a human being trying to figure this stuff out in real time and communicate what I find. So I think, and I got this from my conversation with Vervaeke. He's a cognitive scientist. He said that the same psychophysiological architecture that we use to adapt to the world, which is what makes human beings superior to all other species, because we can learn faster, right? And we can take those learnings and organize ourselves under these canopies of different ideologies. And that's why we're the dominant
blind
species.
Spots, basically.
Yes, but that same fucking machinery, that genetic physiological machinery that enables us to adapt, opens us up to self-deception. So I think if you just want to rip the whole thing off of this, but yeah, I self-deceived to some extent, but it was exacerbated by the communication medium. And I think one thing that someone that I really respect said to me, they said that up until this point, you've basically had a pristine reputation. So as soon as you had a chink in the armor, it allowed everyone to pour in and just whatever thing they ever wanted to say to you about whatever, it's like now was the opportunity. So it was that much more fuel on the fire.
See, that's what I was referring to by like the contrast, right? And I think this is not like univariate, right? Like there's multiple variables. So like, was that an aspect of the expression that you got in return? Almost certainly, right? There's an aspect of envy, let's say. But I do think like the larger aspect, or like, perhaps I like to think, was like this principle of honesty that was offended, not just because of the principle being offended, but that it was almost like an offense to each person that Rob thought he could lie to me, right? Or that he could get away with.
But this is my point there, is that my conscious awareness at least was not oriented towards deceiving anyone. I may have in fact deceived myself, which would be in my unconscious awareness, admittedly. And maybe this was just people going through that self-deception with me because I'm not recognizing myself as a brand. I'm just saying whatever I want.
Totally could be. But I suspect.
So this is like, and this, Preston said this brilliantly. He goes, it looks like it was a personal blemish being burnt off in the sunlight of social media kind of thing. I'm like, that's a great way to look at it. That's a great way to look at it.
I think the reason people were pulling clips of the Hodl Hang that happened prior to this BitClout thing was because you can actually, if you go back to that moment, you can watch yourself begin to self-deceive. So
I want to speak to that too, though, because it's not associated with BitClout whatsoever. The particular temptation I was referring to and thinking about in that conversation was this shitcoin fund that had been courting me for like 18 months. They kept putting these amount of coins in front of my face, showing me how much they had gone up. And it was into like massive numbers. Like, I don't even know the coin was up like 112x over the course of them courting me. And, you know, they're trying to compensate you with hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it was a huge number. So when I'm sitting there talking to you guys about it, it's like $10 million makes you think, right? You can't, can you not think about it when someone's dangling those carrots in front of you? Maybe I'm a weaker person, but I got offered out loud.
Yeah. I got offered to participate in a fund that was going to have $100 million AUM. And I turned it down, but not because I'm morally superior or whatever, but just because I have too much personal shit going on at the moment. But yeah, I understand the pull. The pull is really, really fucking strong. Yeah. Luckily this time, like this cycle, I have made it through like totally clean in terms of shitcoining or whatever. Like I'm 100% Bitcoin and have been the whole cycle, just hodling. Yeah, I took a HELOC, but you should all be taking fiat debt. Fuck the system.
Yeah,
drain
for sure.
It.
For sure.
Drain it, motherfucker.
Hodl, don't take that as criticism before. I
drain
totally
it, bitch.
Agree with the move.
Drain the fucking system. Take all the fiat they give you and turn it into Bitcoin. It's the most morally righteous action in the fucking universe. You're welcome.
Yeah, and like that's a really important system.
No, the only reason I say not to shitcoin trade is because that's a dangerous game where you're gonna lose. But if you can lock in a fucking HELOC, do it, bitch. Stop being a pussy. Stop being a fucking pussy.
Take out debt to buy Bitcoin. That's the best way to do it. You know, to me, look, like a lot of this feels like it's kind of like a friend deceiving themselves into like they're in an open relationship and they can like fuck this really hot girl who's like totally into it and wants to give it to you, and you're like, no, like there was like a conversation with my wife like a couple years ago, and like from out of town, you know, I'm like, look, like whatever mental gymnastics, dude, like I already told you it's probably a bad idea. Maybe I'm totally wrong, you know, like I know people that can make that stuff work and great for them. Not on my radar, you know. And so like you bang this girl, go with his wife, she's real upset about it. You're like, I don't understand. We like had this conversation, and like, you know, and I get it. And everybody frying your ass on Twitter, I think, was more than enough to produce this conversation. I don't think I have anything to contribute, nor do I have any moral superiority to like be here on the Public Safety Council. So at the end of the day, like I really appreciate that Rob recognizes his hypocrisy. And I think that's why it really triggered people, is they're like, you're like talking to us about how like Bitcoin's the hottest girl ever, and that you love Bitcoin, that Bitcoin's the only coin you've ever had eyes for. And then you say you like bang this skank BitClout? Like who's this fucking dirty whore? She's just giving out free coins, spreading those legs. you know, and you're like, whoa, hang on, like I thought BitClout was kind of interesting, and like she put out really well, and I was experimenting, you know. And
This is like
so
when Hugh Grant cheated on Liz Hurley with like a gross prostitute, you know, and then he went on Jay Leno, and Jay Leno was like, "What were you thinking?" And he was like, "Gee shucks, I don't know, buddy." And then people started liking him again, you know.
I think so. To put a cherry on the top of what I was saying too, like this is how I saw the reaction when it originally kicked off, or how I would approach it, Rob. I guess a better way to say, like, I actually think the appropriate response to the community is thanks and gratitude. And I'll explain that. It's because of this. All of the vitriol, all of the things that they've expressed towards me that come through their own insecurities, their own hate, their own hangups, all that shit, irrelevant to me. I'm gonna like that just goes away because I don't care. But nuggeted in there somewhere is actually a service they provided me, which is helping me see through my own self-deception so that I can become a better version of myself. That's how I see it. So like that would be my approach. Now, if anybody needs to be apologized to or to accept an apology, I would say it's you to yourself. And I think you've probably already done that, right? And again, like, I almost hate that I'm saying these words because amongst the four of us, you're probably the best person for lack of a better term, you know, like, so like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
it's true.
I'm just saying, like, I have so much respect for you that like, there's an element of in my mind thinking we're nitpicking, but again, I want to do you the respect of helping you actualize the best version of yourself. Because I know ultimately that's what you want. And for me to do that, that's me communicating honestly with you. And so I think that the same as me doing that now is what the community did en masse with a bunch of shit packaged around that like service, but an element of value in that so that you could grow and become better.
Fair enough. And this is where, once again, it's not black or white, because there may be this service baked into it that burned away my own personal blemish in the sunlight of Twitter sphere, I guess. But here's another thing, and there's a self-deception baked into Bitcoin toxicity, in my opinion, in this controversy. And that is, this was pointed out to me by Gigi, actually. He said, look, bro, shitcoins feed on engagement. That's their whole thing. So when you tweeted that out, the first fucking tweet, you were playing into the hands of the shitcoin. I'm like, okay, fair enough. What's the purpose of an immune system? An immune system is there to nullify threats. So if shitcoin is threat or scam and it feeds on engagement, Bitcoin toxicity is what amplified the fucking engagement of this thing through the roof, to the point where Sam Harris is tweeting about BitClout a week and a half later. Like, it went bananas. So the actual autoimmune system, cultural autoimmune system of Bitcoin toxicity does also backfire. There is autoimmune disease built into it. It can also self-deceive. I don't know if I'm like, if I triggered this with my own self-deception and it has a little self-deception or what, but it's not fucking like black or white. It's not like the toxic. I hate it when people say toxicity is integrity. It's like, get the fuck out of here. You're telling people to have fun staying poor on Twitter. You think that's integrity? And the simple single first order thinking on that is like, well, I told a shitcoiner to have fun staying poor, but that's the scene. The unseen are all the spectators that are like, what's wrong with these fucking toxic Bitcoin maximalists telling people to have fun staying poor? I don't think I want to be a part of that. Right. So there are second order effects there. My big takeaway is the world is way more complicated than we're trying to distill it down to. Is like good guy, bad guy, in group, out group, evil, good, moral, immoral, ethical, unethical. Like, it's way fucking messier than that. So
let's remember,
as much as I'm checking myself, Bitcoin needs to go check its fucking self.
Let's remember though, it's a membrane, and like, honestly, there are people we don't want here. There are people we don't want in the core of Bitcoin. Now, I'm not saying like every instance of toxicity is justified. I think, you know, it's rare. It's actually rarer and rarer that instances of toxicity are justified. Back in the early days, you know, when people were labeling us as toxic, they were boundaries, and we were saying, listen, you're a liar. You're lying. This is not true. And then they would say,
Bitcoin
you're toxic.
was more vulnerable.
Right.
Like,
I
what
didn't mean to
even is
interrupt you.
this
I'm just saying that's why
toxicity,
it's
though? Like,
that's
not
my
clear to me.
belief is that the relevance of toxicity is inversely proportionate to the vulnerability of Bitcoin, right? And the analogy I gave was in 10 years, if Bitcoin succeeds as an ossified internet protocol, then you're not going to need toxicity in the same way you don't need toxic TCP/IP or HTTP maximals today. It's like it just is the fucking standard. You don't need to defend it like we have been up till this point.
Yeah, I think, Rob, to your point, like that's why I am not super on the side of like, you know, all press is good press, your profile boosted it, whatever, because like this goes back to my comment about people being responsible for themselves. I'm not taking responsibility for anybody else. You know, like, okay,
Yes,
Rob said
agreed.
this and somebody said that, like, that's up to you. So my biggest thing here was just the principle and your relationship to it. And hence the, you know, what I've been saying here. And like, and this is an interesting thing I've been thinking about lately. Like when we're all, if things keep going the way we anticipate they're going to go, like there's going to be a lot of wealthy people that we interact with in this space, right? When everyone's rich, rich doesn't matter that much. The currency is going to be trust and integrity, right? And that's going to be the determinant of these relationships that we form as we move forward in time. And I think part of the reason why the community kind of obsesses with certain principles, and look, like we have to realize that we're all being subjected to this phenomenon. It's not like, you know, how much of these responses are even conscious? Like we're kind of swept up in the wave of this thing. And so, but I think there's a partially conscious, perhaps largely subconscious recognition that these principles themselves are what's going to play in the future of honesty, of integrity, of truth, you know, that kind of stuff. And it seems to be pushing itself through imperfect filters of Bitcoiners, right? So these principles of honesty is coming through like this imperfect, emotional, insecure wreck of a person. But there's an element coming through, which is why, like, I don't have a problem at all with any of the toxicity, any of the have fun staying poor, any of that jazz, because I see past it. I do my best to see past it all, only to the benefit of it. And equally not taking responsibility for people like being exposed to one of your tweets and being like, I'm going to buy BitClout. I'm not taking responsibility for someone on the pursuit of truth or pursuit of financial security or whatever, running into a toxic maxi on Twitter and then being turned away at the gates because of that. You don't want it bad enough if that's the case. You're not on a genuine pursuit of truth if that's the case. I know we could all game plan it out and see like, well, wouldn't we invite more people in if everyone was kind? But there's an element of, this is a genuine quest for something of extremely great value that we're only beginning to understand here. And the pursuit of that, like any pursuit of something of great value, like finding the treasure which the dragon holds and the person you have to transform to become to get that, right? To use Peterson's terminology and language that we often explore, is an element of confronting something that puts you off, that offends you, that is scary, that is whatever. And if that turns you away, then by definition, you're not ready for that treasure. But if it doesn't, if you can dissolve that and get past that fear or whatever the blockage is, then you get to the truth. And so I tend to, again, like I was saying with the people that got mad at you, like, yeah, a lot of shit came through that message, but within that was the enforcement of a principle that I think is good and genuine, which was honesty. And to the extent that, yeah, and so I don't have a problem with how people
I
communicate.
agree, and the costs, again, competition is a discovery process, right? You remove the competition, you move into fiat world where we're not discovering things, we're just buying into someone's opinion. So the cost of competition is collateral damage, right? People get hurt, people get broken, people lose money, people make money, blah, blah, blah. So I guess that what I'm trying to point out here is that when Bitcoin toxicity moralizes itself as some type of moral force, I think that's bullshit, right? Like it is a membrane, as you said, it's part of the competitive environment. So to sit there and tell yourself, oh, I'm doing the moral thing by telling this person to have fun staying poor, I don't think that's true, because what you don't see is the middle income person that's not responding and viewing this and is now being pushed outside of the membrane, into which you're trying to identify yourself as a moralizer to pull more people in by being toxic. What I'm saying is the autoimmune response, just like in biology, can have adverse consequences, right? It can diverge from its intended aim. And that's something I've observed prior to this. And this is why I've really tried to stay, and hopefully this is shown through my work and my speech and all that. Like I'm a non, I don't even know the right word. I try to not be a toxic maximalist. I try to be a rational maximalist. I try to be, and I don't want, and this too, I don't want to be identified as a moralist. The same as I don't think toxic Bitcoiners should identify themselves as moralizers. I don't want to identify myself that way. Now, talking about morals, writing about morals, philosophy, I did get pulled into that to some extent, but I identify as a freedom maximalist, which is say like a free market capitalist or a sovereignist. This is what I identify as. I'm not out here to be a saint and preach to you and tell you about the right and wrong things to do. I'm just here to call it like I see it as best that I can. So,
and I think that's what we all should be doing, right? The challenge with the first part of what you said is like, there's no arbiter to decide the truth of like to judge, basically. There's no judge, right? So that means like the only thing we can do is speak and act in the manner that we believe is best to do so. And the world that opens up to us as a result is the best feedback. In my opinion, pursuing truth and freedom seems to be a helpful guide in that journey, but impose what you find in that journey only on yourself, right? Because how can you impose? You can't impose anything on anyone else. And I understand that's what it seems like others are doing. And actually it is what others are doing. All I'm saying is like, I accept that because I can parse the data and take what's of value from all the other shit, right? And because at the end of the day, it's all just information, which helps us restructure our judgment of things, right? Like when, Rob, when all this kicked off, like, and everyone who commented on it and your response, like all that happened is we all learn more about each other from which to construct our relationships to one another better. And so that's part of the reason why I appreciated it, right? Like I learned more about you. I learned more about, you know, whomever on Twitter said stuff. And then of course, we learn about more in response to it, how everyone responds to it and the people that still hang on to it. Like, and it's up to us to take that data and integrate it in the way that we think is best and pursue relationships and move forward, you know? So that's the point I wanted to make.
Yeah, it's Darwinian.
And I just want to comment on, I think one aspect of what toxicity is that like for the last decade, we've seen every single fucking scam on the planet come in and say, hey, I have a new coin. This is pro Bitcoin. It's better. People are pretty agitated and upset with it at this point in time. So I understand the radical response of, yeah, have fun staying poor. Like that shit coin, it'll most likely go to zero, as we've seen with pretty much every project, whether it's on a 5 or 10 year time span. People are particularly pissed about Ethereum because it actually is a security. It has a 70% pre-mine. This went to the original founders. Like a lot of people don't understand this. And when they use language saying, no, Ethereum's just like Bitcoin, it's decentralized. Like they're making that term meaningless, which, you know, essentially is part of my whole metaphysics is like, this is all just a giant language clusterfuck. And that's why this word crypto, which means secret, is literally concealing its actual nature towards people. Because at the end of the day, if you know what decentralization is and what cryptography is and why proof of work is important, you get that Bitcoin's the only thing that actually does this shit in any meaningful kind of way. And people are just pissed off at the point of like, look, Bitcoin is fundamentally different and a different mission, different ideology, and different entire basis of what it's trying to do from all these shitcoin projects. And to me, at the end of the day, what it really comes down to, one's pro status, one's anti-status. And if you're not understanding this at that point in time, there's probably a lot more digging to be done. And so like, I think that while this toxic dialogue repels people, like I surely can't stop it. In addition to the fact of that, I find all of this very distracting. You know, like what I care about is that we get Bitcoin the successful place that it's going to. And I find all of this noise very distracting and necessary, and I can't stop it. So,
yeah. And I wrote this in the piece and I've repeated it many times. Toxicity has a very important purpose, which is to protect the core of Bitcoin. That makes sense. If it's under attack, be toxic AF, right? Go crazy. But to your point, Eric, on language, there's also a problem when you just start calling everything a scam and everyone a scammer. The language loses all fucking meaning. It's no longer, it's the boy that cried wolf, right? So
there are different ways
that's
to
the other
say
thing
that.
I'm pointing towards. What's that?
You know, I said there are different ways to say that, though. You can say the same thing because, honestly, it's true. Everyone is a scammer. I think the nicer way to say it is no one is better than their incentives. I think it's more crystalline when you say it that way.
Correct. Yeah. Agreed with that. And that's great. That's a more nuanced conversation, right? You can actually dig in. Well, what are the incentives here? What are the incentives there? And you actually get to some understanding. Whereas if you're just blanket calling everything and everyone a scammer and a scam, the message is not getting through, right? I might as well tell you all humans are people. It's like, okay, what the fuck did I learn from that?
Hey boys, I gotta get going. I just want to say, Rob, you fucked up, but you're taking ownership of it, and I'm proud of you for that. You're not canceled in my mind. If you think taking a HELOC is shitcoining, eat my fucking dick. Not you, John Vallis. Anybody who thinks that, eat my fucking balls. I don't give a shit what you think. You're a poor loser piece of shit. Go get your fucking paper up, dog. You know how little money $200,000 is to me? It's fucking nothing. It's nothing. I've been hodling since 2014, bitch. What are you gonna fucking do about it? What are you gonna do about it? Oh, and also,
it's definitely shitcoining, but I still love you.
I don't respect Dieter Bob. I take that comment back. Fuck you, Dieter, for life, bitch. All right, bye, everybody.
See you, buddy.
See you, Hodl.
We can start winding it down. Honestly, I appreciate
sure.
everything that was said here. Like the end of all of this, though, like this is what I tried to say at the beginning of the conversation last time, is I feel there's kind of this universal Darwinism in a way. And we keep coming back to competition, and like that gets us closer to the truth all the time. And for all of the errors and self-deception and mistakes or whatever that were made throughout this process, at the end of the fucking day, I sold the thing, the airdrop coin that was given to me or assigned to me or whatever you call it. I sold it for Bitcoin, and then I gave all that Bitcoin to Bitcoin open source dev. So it's like, I feel absolved. I'm like, fuck it, move on. Like that's the,
but was that
you
just
can go
an
through the
attempt?
History and you can talk about all of the nuances, everything that happened. That's fine. But for me, I'm like, I have other things to do now. So
Totally. But what was the motivation behind giving it away?
Because I wanted to have perfect certainty that I was not self-deceiving myself. If I had and I'm not,
But initially
too strong.
Prior to the response, you hadn't intended to give it away, right?
No, I actually had intended to probably give away a portion of it because it's a shit coin airdrop to me. I don't know. I don't know. Backwards looking, I can't say with perfect certainty, but as a result of all the friction, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to look at this thing.
You try to make it right to a certain
I'm
degree,
going to play according to my principles, which freedom, growth, responsibility, all these things, voluntary exchange. But I was nagged by the possibility of having any profit motive in it that would distort my thinking. So I'm like, I have to just give it all away. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I'll never know, basically. So,
yeah, that's it. Well, my final comment on this is, as just like I opened up, like I kind of hate that we're even doing this because you're so much like, there's so much to respect about you that it seems nitpicky. But the reason why I ultimately why we're doing it is because I do think there is something important to be gained by talking these things out, mostly for you and us as individuals. Cause I care far more about the four of you than than the broader Twitter sphere, And so I feel that as friends, we should be trying to hold each other to higher standards, supporting each other, but with honesty when necessary, not just blind support, pat you on the butt and tell you to keep going, right? And as a result of this, I think this dialogue being out there is helpful to people beyond ourselves. And I think it's probably helpful to you on your own journey of growth and stuff like that.
It's been great. And I really appreciate it. I should say that, John, especially you, talking to me after this thing, you felt like someone that I could consult with that just is almost part of my own psyche in a way. That may sound fucking crazy, but someone I could just really come to and just be completely open about it. And I'm trying to do that in general. I'm trying to just be completely open. That's why I'm talking about the intention. I'm actually evaluating the original intention that I had and trying to walk through that. And it's just been an experience, and I hope it benefits me going forward as I do become more of a brand or whatever, have to consider the audience that I'm talking to, and hopefully help me to evaluate myself in a less self-deceiving way with every action that I take, so that I can always come from the foundation of intention before I take an action, versus just quickly taking an action and then having to look backwards to evaluate the intention. Like, I don't want to feel that again. So it has been a good learning process for me. And I hope others can learn by seeing the journey unfold.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, man. It means a lot to me. And if I can just share a very quick anecdote, 2 seconds, but it occurs to me that seems like a parallel between this and what I'm sure many of us who've messed around with psychedelics have sometimes felt, which is, if you're not ready, or if there's things that are hiding latent that you're not ready to confront, they manifest themselves in like scary visions coming at you fast, pointing eyeballs, aggressive, this or that. And I remember when that happened to me the first time, it was so overwhelming. And my initial response was to fight it, like put on my Spartan sword and be like, let's go. But it overcame me. It was too much. And ultimately what I came to, the approach that worked, was a loving curiosity. It's the best way to describe it. And what I mean by that is, all those scary faces, the way for me to disarm them was not to be fearful or to hate them and try to fight them, but was to project love at them. But with the like internal dialogue saying like, all right, I get it. Like you're mad at me. You want to hurt me, whatever. I don't care. What are you here to tell me? What are you here to tell? Like, I'm curious about why you're here. I'm not afraid of any of your bullshit. And there's kind of an interesting parallel to anytime someone's getting canceled by the mob, right? But I think the Bitcoin mob is obviously a bit different than like the broader social media and social mob. But anyways, I thought that was an interesting parallel. And I think maybe we'll explore it some other time. But Eric, did you have any final thoughts?
I mean, the reason that I did the analogy of cheating on one's wife is I feel like this is what it's been witnessing. Like, like say, and the other is that like, if I was in the Rob's shoes, 90 million stats of the potential by, this hottie whispering secret nothings into my ear, like, I don't know, maybe I would have been in the same position as him or something. I appreciate how open he's been about the process, because like this shit's hard and complicated, about people being really critical about you as a person, like on social media and openly. And like, I don't think I necessarily have the skin or fortitude to deal with that. So I appreciate it. And I also appreciate the secondary conversation with him being like, hey man, when I like banged BitClout 2 months ago, like I didn't realize that like that was sending mixed messages to people. And like, I truly do love Bitcoin, and like BitClout's a whore. And I'm sorry that I ever made that, corollary thing. And I'm like, it's cool, Rob, like I get it. Like BitClout had stats to give out, and like she was giving them out to you for a lot, and so yeah, and it's hard for me to try to rise to the place to be like, I couldn't do that, because like I get that like we are all men, and not to be extreme, but the line between good and evil is what divides our own heart. And so if I'm in the same situation, I don't know how I would perform that. That was good, because that was right where I kind of was ending anyways. Awesome. But yeah, so I love you. I love us getting to all vibe in person. It was tons of fun.
John, you're on mute.
And I just remember at the nighting party, we were all just kind of like rapping, and people were like standing around us listening. And I was like, what fucking planet am I on now? Where like, I'm a cool kid. You want to talk about weird shit with me?
Yeah. Well, and back to John's point sorry, just one last thing is that Bitcoin's principles propagating through us. I'm just trying to get back to fucking work. Like, it's just this whole thing, fault, blame, all aside, whatever, is like just focused me and committed me to my work. I think
that's a benefit in itself, right?
Yeah. So
because it's been clear, man, you've been pumping out amazing stuff, and how much of it was motivated by how this has impacted your focus, right? So
yeah,
there's another little
your
silver
fucking
lining.
heels, and you pick up your sword and shield, and I don't know. I just feel It is energizing. Conflict is energizing for sure.
Mhm. Yeah. All right, boys. Well, the internet is fucking with us. So I love you both. I appreciate this conversation. And I'll talk to you again soon.
I love you guys. Thank you
Likewise,
so
gentlemen.
much.